Hello, this is my presentation about the history of the NBA. The NBA has been a league of greatness for many years, dating back to the early 1940s. There have been many great eras of basketball, and today's question is, which era of NBA basketball is the most dominant? The answer to this question will come once I go over some of the data that I've collected, such as star power, team dominance, and the amount of records set in that area. The conclusion is based off of stats, but it's mainly opinionated. The 60s are basically the beginning of NBA basketball, or when they got popular. But the NBA was actually established in 1943. The 60s had stars like Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Casey Jones, and Oscar Robertson, the original Mr. Triple-Double. In terms of team dominance, the Boston Celtics won championships from 1957 to 1969. Setting a record for the most individual championships, Bill Russell had 11 in 13 seasons in the NBA. And then also Wilt Chamberlain currently holds 72 of the NBA's total records. The 70s are a flashy era of basketball. More stars started to show up because of the ABA merger. The ABA was the American Basketball Association. It was a separate league that rivaled the NBA, but eventually had to shut down because of costs. 4 teams out of the 11 ABA teams went into the NBA. Those were the Denver Nuggets, the Indiana Pacers, the San Antonio Spurs, and the Brooklyn Nets. The stars included Julius Erving, Elgin Baylor, and all those people like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the greatest scorer of all time. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had 6 rings and 6 MVPs and is top at the all-time scoring list. The 80s is an era of some of the greatest basketball players of all time. It was also when basketball was one of the most watched sports in the nation. The 80s had amazing stars like Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Dominique Wilkins, and an entire team of Lakers stars called the Showtime Lakers, who earned their nickname from how flashy and good at basketball they were. The Lakers-Celtics rivalry also became prominent in the 80s because it was always those 2 teams that were in the NBA Finals. This is the biggest rivalry in NBA as of today. As far as records, a few players are on the top 50 all-time NBA scoring. The 90s are called the golden age of basketball, and for a good reason too. There were a bunch of superstars like Karl Malone, Patrick Ewing, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, and the list goes on. The player that is considered the greatest of all time, Michael Jordan, also played in the 90s and was in his prime. The Chicago Bulls dominated the era, going to and winning all 6 of their championships. The other 4 winners were the Houston Rockets 2 times, the infamous Bad Boy Pistons, and the San Antonio Spurs. The 90s also had the greatest team of all time, arguably, in the 96 Bulls, going 72-0 and finishing it off with a championship. On the records list, there are more players from the 90s era on top 50 all-time lists than any other era. The 2000s are a slower era of basketball, but probably the most fun to watch because it had Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bean Bryant, Allen Iverson, Tim Duncan, Vince Carter, and many more recognizable legends. The most dominant team in the 2000s was the Los Angeles Lakers and the Boston Celtics. The Lakers three-peated, and the Celtics had one of the first super teams. Tim Duncan is considered one of the best players of all time due to his fundamentals and how many championships he's won. Vince Carter has also played with 40% of all NBA players that have ever played in the league, and he retired last year. Kobe Bryant, a.k.a. the Black Mamba, is 4th all-time scoring and retired in 2016 and has passed away on January 26, 2020. The 2010s are an era that revolutionized basketball. The three-pointer became more prioritized. The stars of the 2010s include Stephen Curry, Kevin Durant, Kelly Oubre Jr., Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Zion Williamson, and Dwayne Wade. There is also another player considered the greatest of all time, LeBron James. Stephen Curry is a big influence on how the game of basketball is played by setting three-point shooting records year after year. LeBron James is third all-time scoring after passing Kobe on January 25th, 2020. The Golden State Warriors also set a record for having the greatest regular season record of all time, but then the Cavaliers set a record by beating the 73-9 Warriors after coming back 3 games to 1, which is the first time in NBA history that has ever happened. The end.